and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And as Ann Northrup predicted on last week's show, can we get that tape? The U.S. Supreme Court did stay the start of same-sex marriages in Virginia.
We just heard it as we're taping. Not unexpected. That's what they've been doing, but we'll analyze that. In other news, new polling shows continued shifts towards support for LGBT rights in the United States.
There was a win for LGBT rights in Fayetteville, Arkansas, but a setback in Baton Rouge.
There's cake news this week. Another baker, this time in Pennsylvania, won't bake a lesbian wedding cake. But then in New York, bakers have been told they cannot discriminate.
Chris Kluwe has settled his suit with the Minnesota Vikings, and a Division I college football player, first one, has come out.
Correct.
You'll have to stay tuned to see who it is.
The Veterans Administration is being sued for unequal treatment of same-sex spouses.
The Smithsonian has added to its LGBT history collection.
And get yourself ready for a little demonstrating in New York. The anti-gay Sultan of Brunei is looking to acquire the Plaza Hotel, plus another one here.
The eyes of a gay teen suicide, literally the eyes, are rejected for transplant.
Very strange
by the
story.
FDA.
Makes no sense at all. We'll examine that. And Andy has been to a couple of great art exhibits in New York.
You wouldn't know it to look at me.
And he's going to show us some pictures, including pictures from one on the degenerate art that the Nazis banned.
Okay. So we do start with the U.S. Supreme Court. The Fourth Circuit in the Virginia marriage case had said, no, we're not going to impose a stay on our decision. So clerks in the clerk of Prince William County, using the Alliance Defending Freedom group, applied for a stay at the U.S. Supreme Court with Justice Roberts. He sent it to the whole court, and they imposed a stay.
No marriages yet in Virginia. And, of course, this goes beyond Virginia because this is affects the whole Fourth Circuit. Their decision in the Virginia cases was to get rid of the ban on same-sex marriage, but ultimately this would affect the entire Fourth Circuit, and that includes North Carolina, South Carolina, and West Virginia. So if the stay had not been imposed, it could have been very interesting.
It includes Maryland, too, where they already have same-sex marriage.
Yes.
So, but the thing is, the Attorney General of Virginia in this case, Mark Herring, he's a guy who would not defend the state ban. He's a Democrat, but he joined in asking the Supreme Court to stay the Fourth Circuit decision, saying it could have unintended negative consequences if the court later rules, the U.S. Supreme Court, against marriage equality in Virginia.
Well, and the continuing strangeness of this is that there are 19 states in the District of Columbia that have legalized same-sex marriage, and where these marriages are now performed routinely every day, including a state in the Fourth Circuit, Maryland. So why it would be seen as dangerous to allow these marriages to start taking place in the other states, it seems a little crazy.
Well, because they're always, the Supreme Court always, in the Windsor decision, the Supreme Court seemed to say, we're leaving this up to the states. They did not grant a stay in the Pennsylvania case because none of the Pennsylvania officials would defend the law. There was only a clerk who was asking, and they didn't, and it was Alito.
Yeah, and her standing was not huge.
But, you know, don't forget, as we've said, the other side makes the case That is what you've said, Supreme Court, that this is up to the states. So you have not definitively ruled whether states have to do this, have to do this.
On constitutional grounds. And when you say it's up to the states, do you mean the state legislature, the state voters, the state courts? What are we talking about here?
Well, when it's resolved at the state level. For instance, it could have been resolved at the state level in New York in 2005 because it only went up. It went through state courts and it went to the Court of Appeals, the highest court, and they ruled against us. But if they had ruled for us, that would have been it.
This is already too complex for me, and we're only about 6 minutes into the show. Okay. So let's try to get some clarity on other things.
Okay.
So meanwhile, in Utah, they are arguing over a couple of things there. The state had, the 10th Circuit Court said that the Utah ban on same-sex marriages couldn't stand, but that decision is stayed pending higher court review. So the state asked the 10th Circuit full court to look at this en banc, and they have been denied. They have said, no, we're not going to do an en banc review. So you're going to have to go to the Supreme Court if you want to challenge our decision on this.
Now, the Attorney General there wants the Supreme Court to take it, and the plaintiffs, oppose the attorney. And then the plaintiffs there are opposing the Attorney General's request for more time.
Well, that's a different part, because what did happen in Utah when the Circuit Court got rid of the ban was that people did start getting married because the Circuit Court wouldn't impose a stay there, and so people started getting married. And the state has refused to recognize those marriages. The court has ordered them to recognize those marriages. The state is now asking for more time before they start recognizing those marriages. And that is
don't worry. If it doesn't
under...
work out, you can always go to the Supreme Court. They seem very friendly so far on this towards the other side, sadly.
Well, in an interim way. We don't know ultimately what's going to happen.
In Arizona, Lambda Legal is suing for the recognition of same-sex marriages for a couple where they're battling a serious illness. Though sometimes we get an exception when you're about to die.
Well, yes, pancreatic cancer in this case. This is a couple who were married in California are suing for recognition of their marriage in Arizona where they live. And now emergency recognition because one is dying of pancreatic cancer. But meanwhile, a couple of good decisions in Arizona and California about transgender people being married. You remember the very famous case of Thomas Beatty, the transgender man who got pregnant and gave birth a couple of times.
The pregnant man on all the talk shows.
Exactly. But he is legally a man, and he is now trying to divorce his wife.
Well, he lost a lower court decision on this because they said, look, you still have female reproductive capacity. You gave birth.
Well, the Arizona Court of Appeals has now ruled that he has a constitutional right to give birth, and they can get over themselves, and he has a right to divorce. So they have affirmed his right to divorce. And a California court has also recognized a transgender man as male for the sake of divorce and can divorce his wife. She was trying to claim that their marriage was never legal because he had not transitioned enough to, or was not legally enough male when they married.
And these things arise when people don't want to pay spousal support, et cetera, and they don't want to get out of paying money.
Exactly.
In Idaho, the 9th Circuit has denied an en banc hearing there on the same-sex marriage case. And in the 7th Circuit, which is going to take place in Chicago, they're going to hear big same-sex marriage cases from Indiana, Wisconsin, and Illinois on August 26th. And there's going to be a demonstration on August 25th at 5:30 at Federal Plaza there in Chicago, South Dearborn and Adams.
Yeah, that should be great. Remember the guy who was the music director at a Catholic high school in Illinois, Inverness, Illinois, Holy Family. I'm sorry, church, not high school. He was the music director at the church, and he was fired because he announced he was going to marry his same-sex partner. He'd been out at the church for years, and this is supposed to be a progressive Catholic church.
Yes, he still goes there.
Different, all-inclusive church. Well, the church decided to hold a listening session on this issue, and 700 people showed up to discuss this.
Most of whom supported him.
But not all. Some were against him.
Well, sure.
Yeah. Lambda Legal Defense and some LGBT veterans transgender veterans are suing the Department of Veteran Affairs. I'm sorry, this is not about transgender veterans. This is about veterans with same-sex spouses suing the Department of Veterans Affairs for recognition of their legal marriages when they've gotten married legally, but they don't live in a state that recognizes it. Because there are regulations in the Veterans Department that say the marriages you recognize are those that are legal in the state where you live, or where you live when you were married. But if they had to go out of state to get married, then that doesn't quite fall under the definition.
Well, the Veterans Administration has made some, has been problematic in this area and many other areas if you've been following the news. But in terms of like Social Security and things like that, the federal government has said, no, you can move anywhere you want and you'll still keep your Social Security and stuff like that, right?
Yes, they have allowed some benefits, but not all. So it's a mishmash, and we need to straighten out.
We're working on it.
Well, if the Supreme Court would legalize same-sex marriage everywhere, then we would not be arguing about these questions of where you're married and where it's recognized and where it isn't.
And if you're not completely tired of us talking about this all the time, you can learn more about it at the new Marriage Equality USA website. It's at marriageequality.org. It's a spiffy new website, but it'll keep you up to date on what's happening with all the cases, etc., and also provide you with some tools if you're fighting for same-sex marriage in your state.
I think I misspoke earlier. I think I had an error in my notes, and this crowd is very good about corrections.
Let's do it now.
So let me correct on the fly. I said that it was a Utah case where the circuit had denied en banc review, but in fact you were right. It was the Ninth Circuit Idaho case, and I wrote down Utah when I meant Idaho.
It's easy to get confused because there's so much darn news to keep up with these days.
But in Indiana, the judge who previously overturned the ban on same-sex marriage,
Richard Young, a U.S. district judge,
has done it again. For another couple, has ordered a marriage performed elsewhere recognized, and has reinstated the governor in a same-sex legalization marriage suit. The governor Mike Pence, Republican, had earlier claimed that I have nothing to do with marriage. I have no power in this. And then he went out and, issued all sorts of orders about benefits and everything.
That's called lying.
Yes. Well, the judge said, what did he say? That it was, like a horrible misstatement or something. I'm not quoting exactly. But he essentially called the governor a liar and said, all right, you're back as a defendant in this lawsuit.
Interesting news from Broward County, Florida. This is kind of bold. The commissioners there voted to look at withholding taxpayer funding that would be used in state appeals of the strike down on the ban on same-sex marriage. That's kind of bold.
Yeah. Well, here's a smaller, ugly, bold move at Brigham Young University, which has a contract with Hallmark greeting cards to stock their bookstore. The vendor who places the cards, brought in the monthly assortment or whatever, and it included congratulations on your same-sex wedding cards. And the BYU bookstore took a look at these and said, no, these are out.
I mean, if I were Brigham Young, I'd get rid of all those Hallmark cards because, there's a lot of sedition in them, apparently.
Well, if I were Hallmark, I would say to BYU, you take these cards or you take none of our cards.
Well, so students are not allowed to congratulate gay people on their same-sex marriages? Is that a mortal sin?
I don't think they'll be kicked out of school, but they cannot buy cards in the bookstore to do so.
Well,
you are allowed to be gay at BYU.
What if you go to a same-sex wedding? Because you go to a same-sex wedding in Uganda, you get 10 years in prison.
Yes, exactly. And maybe Kenya soon.
Well, maybe not. We'll
a couple of interesting political stories. Facebook has given $10,000 to the the election campaign of the Attorney General in Utah, who is fighting same-sex marriage so vociferously. And people are really upset about this and starting online petitions and everything. Now, Facebook says, look, we give to all sorts of politicians for all sorts of reasons. This guy supports an open internet, and that's why we are supporting him. The
business of Facebook is business.
Exactly right. And we support an open internet too, but we're not donating to the Utah Attorney General. And AT&T has given $75,000 to the Attorney General of Texas, Greg Abbott, who's running for governor.
Well, you know, this all started with like Target giving to anti-gay people, I think in Minnesota, was it?
Yes.
You know, and it's...
Well, and then you have Brendan Ike, the CEO of Mozilla, who gave $1,000
The National Organization for Marriage lost their case versus the IRS over when a clerk at the IRS inadvertently released their 990 form, and now they're seeking $691,000 in legal fees, even though they lost the case because they said it was your mistake, blah blah blah, and the Fed said no.
Mistake? You can't get paid for a mistake, I guess. Well, I don't know what harm was actually suffered by Nam
paying all those legal fees.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about cake?
Yes, that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, shall we start with Pennsylvania?
Yes, because we have a film report.
In Schuylkill Haven, Pennsylvania, there is a famous local bakery called Cake Pros, and a lovely little lesbian couple wanted them to bake their wedding cake. And they said no. Here is...
Jennifer and Bethany Petrich wanted a cake for a ceremony to renew their vows. Now, they had an appointment with the Cake Pros in Schuylkill Haven to taste some of the cakes. The couple says they were devastated when they got a call they weren't going to be given service.
I love the work that they did. It tastes great, and it's a hometown bakery. I wanted to support my hometown.
Growing up in Schuylkill Haven, Jennifer and Bethany Petrich are very familiar with the Cake Pros bakery. That's why when the two were planning a ceremony to renew their wedding vows, it seemed like an obvious choice for them to supply the cake.
Well, my mom, who was planning our wedding, called and made the appointment for us. And it was okay at that time, and she was open and honest and said it's for Bethany and Jennifer.
A call to Jennifer's mom while Jennifer was in the hospital changed that.
They had called and said to her that they were a Christian bakery, and the owner had talked to Jesus for 2 weeks, and that because it was two females getting married, she couldn't make our cake.
The couple says they were confused and frustrated.
We asked her to make us a cake, not marry us, and that was, I didn't understand.
I'm just very disappointed that there's still discrimination out there, and it was just a cake.
That's when they took to Facebook to let everyone know about their story. Since then, the bakery has gotten a lot of attention, and the owner says employees of the store have been harassed.
I'm sorry for the damage that's been done as far as hurt feelings.
Lorraine Fleming owns the Cake Pros Bakery. She told Eyewitness News it was a tough decision since she has gay people in her family, but she says it was a religious choice and she stands by it.
I'm not sorry for my decision, and I feel strong. I know that I'm doing the right thing.
The couple says it's a shame they still feel discriminated as a gay couple, and they believe it's time for that to end.
It doesn't matter who you are or what you like or don't like or what you look like. Just be nice to each other. It really makes the world an easier, nicer place to live in.
What were those rainbow bottles behind the baker? Did you notice those?
Syrup or something.
What are you doing?
I noticed the purple rain slickers they were both wearing. I like those. I noticed that the cake shop owner says she talks to Jesus.
Yes.
I want to know if that's in Aramaic or Hebrew. and why she feels that she's the one to pass judgment.
I think she can.
Isn't God supposed to be the one who passes judgment?
As they did with the bakery in Colorado, I think some enterprising people can easily prove that she's not consistent to this. She just effing hates gay people.
Even the ones in her family.
Yeah, because if she was asked to do a lot of other kinds of cakes, to celebrate a lot of other kinds of things that don't line up with Jesus, although she talks to him, so I guess you can figure it out. But we have better news in New York.
Oh, wait a minute. Whether she is a hypocrite or not in her choice of who to bake cakes for, this is wrong. And this is so hideously judgmental on her part, and just disgusting. And people who call themselves Christians, particularly the ones who talk to Jesus for 2 weeks.
That's why it disgusts me that, you know, we're in the midst of a horrible crisis here in New York over racial tension and the killing of an African-American man by a cop, you know, and the mayor calls together mostly Catholic leaders, a couple of Jews, a couple of Muslims together at a table. No atheists, no other kinds of people, to unite the city and morally lead us. And most of these people are anti-gay bigots who repel us.
And anti each other.
Right.
In
when
most
it comes
days
right down
of the week.
to it.
Yes. Right. Mine's better than yours.
It's a very bad move by de Blasio. Yeah. Anyway, but we have to point out in that Pennsylvania story, Pennsylvania is the only state that has same-sex marriage that doesn't protect civil rights on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. Now, the little town could pass an ordinance, too, as one of those other little towns said they might, when we reported on this kind of a thing. But better news in New York, because we do have at least sexual orientation covered in the state law. So the New York State Division of Human Rights ruled that businesses cannot discriminate on that basis in the case of Liberty Ridge Farm that did not want to host a lesbian wedding.
Right. And Liberty Ridge Farm tried to claim that it was a private business.
It is.
But that claim, well, it is a private business, but what they were actually trying to say was that they had the right to discriminate on the basis of their religion because they were private people. And what happened when the Division of Human Rights
what does that mean? They don't like talking about their sex lives? What does that mean, private? They're a public accommodation.
Well, that's what the Division of Human Rights decided, because they looked into it and they said, all right, you advertise this as a business, you take all comers, and you are just in this case making a decision not to serve people. And for that, you are going to pay a $10,000 fine, and you're going to pay $1,500 to each of the women that you rejected.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $200.
Well, and the idea that, you know, the Pennsylvania cake shop owner who says, I'm sorry there were hurt feelings. Hurt feelings? When you are rejected because of who you are in this kind of situation, let alone any number of other situations, this is not hurt feelings. This is bigotry. Something much more serious than that.
Right. Because ultimately what that means is that you could end up, and we've talked about this, when you pass these kinds of laws that allow this kind of religious freedom, you could end up places where people wouldn't be able to buy food in their hometown.
Exactly. But there is a not tiny but smaller town that did pass a non-discrimination law this week. Fayetteville, Arkansas passed a non-discrimination law that includes sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and about 10 other categories. It's one of these comprehensive laws. But it took them until, what, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning for the city council to vote 6-2 in favor of it.
Almost as long as it took to nominate George McGovern as president of the Democratic Convention in 1972.
They had to go through some machinations to prevent it from immediately going to a repeal vote in November, but the antis can still attack this. There were horrible scare tactics about this. They had Michelle Duggar, the Duggar wife, you know, the Duggar huge family, all those kids, recorded a message that was phoned to the entire town about how horrible it would be if this non-discrimination law passed. And one of the things they were biggest about doing in scare tactics was saying that if this law were passed, it would force churches to host same-sex weddings. And the fact that they will outright lie about these laws
Well,
is
when we were debating the gay rights bill here in New York, I
disturbing.
was on with the leading opponent on Regis Philbin's show, and the guy goes, "This will force the Catholic Church to ordain gay priests." And I said, spontaneously, not being very spokesperson-y, I said, well, if they couldn't ordain gay people, they would hardly have anybody. And the audience groaned. They did not like that. And Regis did not like that.
This was 1923.
It was 1986. It was in the last century, though. But also good news from Orlando, Florida, where they added gender identity protections to their non-discrimination ordinance unanimously. No one spoke in opposition.
But bad news from East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where the Metro Council rejected a non-discrimination law.
And in Houston, the wheels of justice continued to turn slowly. Now, opponents of the LGBT rights law didn't get enough signatures to put it on the ballot, and they are challenging that, but they're not challenging to the extent that they're demanding that this all be settled for November. So it's not going to be on the ballot in November. It's going to be settled in a case that's going to be heard in January.
Right. But meanwhile, the mayor has, out lesbian Anise Parker, has agreed not to put the law, which has been passed, into effect until this is settled in court.
She is treading lightly.
Yeah. Now, the American Bar Association passed a great resolution this last week. They condemned all laws, regulations, and rules or practices that discriminate against LGBT people globally.
I have to think that has something to do with Queer Nation protests against James Silkenhat, who was the president of the ABA, who was about to go speak at a Russian economic forum, and you talked him out of it.
At the stock exchange, yes. Yes, I think we opened his eyes. Look, we played his little speech in front of the Russian representative on this show. He was quite eloquent and quite adamant about the need to stop discrimination. So if we lit a fire under him, great.
An interesting story from the American Journal of Public Health. It says that LGB teens without an at-school adult connection may have the greatest risk for alcohol and substance abuse and mental health outcomes. It's an analysis of a New York City youth risk behavior survey. It's back from 2009. Things have changed a bit since then, but not entirely for kids.
And a study from the Williams Institute, a little discouraging, says that most governments, this doesn't come as a huge surprise, but one we'd rather not confront, most governments are ill-equipped to handle employment discrimination cases.
Right.
And what happens is that you can have a local law against discrimination, but the local authorities don't want to handle it or don't have enough personnel. They refer it to the feds or the states, but the feds or the states don't have the non-discrimination laws, so they don't want to handle it, and so it gets kicked around and lost between the cracks.
The best thing you can do if you're discriminated against, and you do have a law protecting you, is take what's called a private right of action, which means you bring it to a lawyer and you go to court. Now, some places don't allow that under their human rights laws, but that's the best way, because when you meet with a lawyer, he or she is going to decide, am I going to make any money off this case, or can we win it or not?
Right.
And they will evaluate it and tell you, and you can get on with your life.
Well, you may remember that a few weeks ago we were talking about the president issuing an executive order forbidding employment discrimination by federal contractors. The Department of Labor has now issued actual guidance on this and told federal contractors that sex discrimination includes gender identity and expression. But if the executive order specifically forbids gender identity and expression discrimination, why does the Department of Labor have to reinterpret this as sex discrimination?
And the Veterans Administration's got its problems. By the way, a footnote on Fayetteville, this was their first human rights ordinance, I think.
Well, it's across the board, because it includes all these different categories.
Age, gender, national origin, religion, disability, ethnicity, familial status, marital status, socioeconomic background. no discriminating against the poor, and veteran status. It would have been hard to vote against all that just to hurt gay people.
Well, as long as we're talking about discrimination, let us update the story from Del Rapids, South Dakota. We told you about the young man who had come out, who's a coach of the women's volleyball team, I think.
High school coach, yeah.
At St. Mary's Catholic High School. And he was a little, I don't know if I have a contract. I tried to get in touch with the school before I made this announcement, but I didn't reach them.
But I'm having a great time being out. He said
well,
that.
The school has now said he can stay. We're not firing him. But, of course, he has to be celibate because those are the rules of the church. So.
The archdiocese weighed in on this.
Yeah, wait till he gets a boyfriend, then the story will change.
He has to be chaste. That's CHASTE.
Correct.
That doesn't mean you can't have sex, but you can only have sex with, he can only have sex with a woman in marriage. That would be chaste sex.
Let's move to sports news.
Yeah.
Chris Kluwe, the former kicker for the Minnesota Vikings, who charged that he was let go or not renewed because he'd been outspoken in favor of marriage equality, has settled his threatened lawsuit with the Vikings. They have agreed to, no, that's the wrong one. There we go. There's Chris Kluwe.
There he is.
The Vikings have agreed to pay an undisclosed amount of money to 5 LGBT groups.
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years.
Chris is not getting any money out
of
this.
Not a penny.
And he said, go ahead.
Well, he negotiated on behalf of the gay groups, 2 of whom are the Matthew Shepard Foundation and the You Can Play Foundation, 3 others who hadn't been informed yet, so their names were not made public immediately.
Well, he said he's convinced that the owners are committed to the cause. All team employees are going to receive sensitivity training 4 times a year.
Yeah.
The Vikings will host a symposium in the spring on LGBT issues in professional athletics. And he'd originally wanted the whole investigation into the anti-gay coach released and all that stuff. He said, look, they gave me a chance to look at it. It's not a systemic problem. I'm okay with that. He was cut after the 2012 season, and he hasn't been able to find work as a...
Well, he's older. He's older, and that is certainly an excuse for why they would not hire someone who is outspoken.
Here's the kicker quote. He said, you have a children's game and you have basic human rights, and there's always one of those I am going to value more than the other.
And he's right about the Minnesota Vikings owners. They have been progressive and supportive all along. But the actual coach of the team and this particular coach who made homophobic comments are a different story.
Right.
Now, the first picture we showed, you can put up again, he is Chip Seraphin, offensive lineman for Arizona State University. He's a 5th-year senior. He's 6 feet 6 inches tall, 320 pounds, and he has come out of the closet in an interview with a gay magazine in Arizona called Compete.
He said it benefited my peace of mind greatly. He has yet to appear in a game, but the coach is giving him full support. He talked to the players, it's all okay.
And he is on the team, and he's the first active Division I football player. He's got a degree already in biomedical engineering. He is a grad student now, as I said, 5th year senior.
When are we going to get it in Major League Baseball?
They're working on that. We've had it, but not
afterwards,
and not a good story with what's his name in Oakland.
Where are we? In California, out-gay Senator Ricardo Lara has introduced the Potty Parity for Parents Act to get these changing room tables in men's rooms, and apparently they're not common. And he notes there are 2 million dad-only families in the United States and 22,500 same-sex male couples in California alone.
So where are they changing the diapers is the question.
They have to put them on the floor.
Yeah.
It's not easy for me,
In Lakewood, New Jersey, a gay couple living at the Leisure Village, retirement community?
It's a 55-plus place to live.
were harassed by a neighbor who called them faggots and burned or cut a swastika into their lawn.
And quoted Mein Kampf at them.
Well, this harassing neighbor has been arrested, but I can't help but wonder what happens. He's not going to be in jail for the rest of his life. He's back, I assume, next door.
Sometimes people get the message, and sometimes they just get angrier.
I don't know. Someone who's cutting a swastika in your lawn is not someone I would want next door to me.
No, here's one that surprised me. Oakland, California is having its first Pride Parade on August 31st.
Well,
they've had Pride festivals for many years,
Yes.
since 1997, but they're right across, of course, the bay from San Francisco. This is the first parade. Around 30,000 attended the festival last year, so it's a big deal out there.
Sad story from Atlanta, Georgia. A guy named Luke O'Donovan has been sentenced to prison. He was at a party and he was being harassed for being gay.
Attacked by 5 guys.
Yes, and he had a knife and he defended himself. This is his version of the story.
Right.
And supported by witnesses. He struck out at them and stabbed them.
He got 5 stabbings, and he was stabbed 3 times,
Yep.
and yet they did not. It was all over his sexual orientation,
Yep.
and it was not treated as self-defense. What the hell happened to stand your ground?
Well, we have many stories like this, but his attackers were not arrested or charged. He was, and he agreed to a plea deal that is going to send him to prison for 2 years. And the judge is so angry at him, and so angry that he took the plea deal rather than going to trial, where he would have faced like 100 years in prison, that he added all sorts of onerous probation things, like he is barred from most of the state while he's on probation. And
Where is he supposed to go?
Good question. So Luke O'Donovan has actually become quite the object of interest around the world for this case, but we wish him luck in his 2 years
Well,
in
let's give them a
prison.
little better news from the polling by the McClatchy-Maris poll. 71% of American adults now know someone gay. That's up from 39% in 1999.
15 years it's gone from
Wow.
39 to 71.
We, Americans, support same-sex marriage now 54 to 38, up from 27% in 1996 and 35% in 2009.
Well, here's the one I like. In 1985, 89% of the public said they would be upset if their child turned out to be gay.
Yep.
30 years later, only 35% said they would be upset.
48% say they wouldn't be
But
upset.
from 89 to 35 is pretty good.
Yeah, fantastic.
In Oregon, the Health Evidence Review Committee has voted that transgender coverage on Medicaid should be included in the Oregon Health Plan. This is both hormones and surgery. This is a big step forward.
I have a correction from last week. We talked about the murder of a man in Mecca, California, a couple of weeks ago. And
This was my mistake.
Put the town near Los Angeles. It is in Riverside County, which is 140 miles east of L.A. We also said something about Sally
Almost.
Ride. Sally Ride being, maybe I said the first woman in space, but of course the first American woman, right?
Yes.
And the first woman in space was back in '63, and it was a Russian woman. Our viewers, let us know these things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We try to minimize these things, but we appreciate you correcting us, because then we can tell the real story to the viewers who are subject to our mistakes. Last week, East 128th Street in New York City between 5th Avenue and Madison was renamed James Baldwin Place.
He was gay.
He was gay, and he went to public school on that block, and so they've renamed the block in honor of him.
The Smithsonian has added to their LGBT history collection. The thing they're trumpeting is items from Will and Grace.
Your least favorite show.
Well, and then Renee Richards' tennis racket that she...
And more importantly, the first transgender flag. which is a...
Tell me about the transgender flag.
I
Okay.
would if I could.
Well,
but-
Laura Ingraham is not fond of transgenders. She calls parents who accommodate transgender children child abusers. And she said
Must we quote her?
providing them hormone treatment pushes them into a box as if gender isn't a
Now-
box for these kids already.
Really? I
and
wanna
Jack
debate you.
Jack Drescher said it's child abuse to withhold the treatments. He's the...
Why do we care what Laura Ingraham says?
Well,
we can sit here and quote Rush Limbaugh all day long, too.
Yes, we could. But there is, it used to be that we would stand up every time people did this crap and try to stop it. Now we sort of say, well, they have their thing and we have MSNBC.
No,
and now we don't
I
have
don't
to say
think that's what we
anything.
say. I think what we say is they are fewer and fewer and less powerful.
And I would say they're more and more. They feel more and more free to say these things, and unless we speak up, I'm not here, you all are on to her, but...
I see that Andy and I have found a point of contention, which we will undoubtedly continue to explore
I
as
don't
we go
usually do
along.
those stories, because you're right, there's ministers all over the place saying crap all the time.
Yeah.
But, it's like when that Harlem pastor put up on a sign that we should be stoned to death. Well, we did talk about that, because it was right there in Harlem, in our faces, Anyway.
Okay. To be continued.
All right.
But I hope we will not have to continue to go after the Sultan of Brunei. He is supposedly considering buying the Plaza Hotel in New York and the Dream Downtown Hotel.
As well as another one in London.
But if he does, we're going to have to go after him for this law that goes into effect next year where they are going to attempt to stone gay people to death.
Paul Singer, a vulture capitalist who has a super PAC now, spending $2 million on pro-gay Republicans. But, of course,
he always supports Republicans.
Electing them is electing them to an anti-gay party that is working against our rights. So I have a problem with us thinking that he's a good guy.
I have a problem thinking of him as a good guy because he is a hideous vulture capitalist who is driving countries around the world into bankruptcy by insisting.
A lot of our big groups take his money.
Exactly.
Including NGLTF and Freedom to Marry.
Yeah.
And, their attitude is, well, isn't it good that he gives us some of their money?
And HRC.
Yeah?
Yes.
Oregon, the state's low-income health insurance program will now cover transgender...
As we said a minute ago.
Oh, you did that. You got it. Oh, the other states doing it, by the way, are California, Vermont, and the District of Columbia.
Okay.
California has a bill to make birth certificates more gay-friendly, dropping name of mother and name of father and substituting name of parent. It could go into effect in 2016. Poll of Republicans, a majority say they would vote for a gay candidate. Well, we should start calling these people gay Republicans, just the way we used to talk about yellow dog Democrats, because they'd vote for a yellow dog if he or she was a Democrat. And then the wife of the president of the Texas Values Group, Jonathan Saints, an anti-gay activist, well, apparently she left him for another woman, and this was found in
several years ago.
2011 divorce papers. That's when he became the president of the Texas Values Foundation.
We all have our motivations.
Okay. We have any time left?
Yes. Are we ready to move on to international news?
Yes. Yes, we are.
The guy who was running the scam on the website in Russia where he was luring gay kids and then beating them up on camera and putting it on
a neo-Nazi.
Yeah, Maxim something. He's gotten 5 years in prison, but not for that entrapment.
For
other
extremism,
crimes,
the crime of extremism.
Yeah, well, I'm glad he's away for a little while.
At the United Nations, Navi Pillay, P-I-L-L-A-Y of South Africa, is ending her term as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She was a strong advocate of LGBT rights. She says she's leaving with a touch of despair over the human rights situation in the world.
That just makes her a realist.
Advocates praised her for speaking out fearlessly. Apparently, we're not likely to get somebody as good because generally a lot of the countries don't want somebody aggressive in that position.
Well, I'll give her a tiny piece of good news. It looks like the proposed Kill the Gays bill in Kenya.
Stone the Gays bill.
Whatever.
With stones.
is disappearing for the moment, but we know how these things pop up again. But meanwhile, the LGBT group in Kenya is going to sue. They've been emboldened by our court victory in Uganda.
Yes,
and
I know.
They're suing to overturn the anti-sodomy law in Kenya.
Well, this is the leading activist there, Eric Guattari, doing this. I don't know if everybody else is on board with the strategy, but he thinks they can do it.
I'm in favor of pushing the boundaries.
The Attorney General there said that gays are a threat to humanity, and you don't like me quoting these people, and our sexual parts don't fit.
Well, if he's a public official,
I think it's a she, but anyway.
Or a she, I'm a little more interested in their quotes because they have some power. Laura Ingraham, I think, is irrelevant.
In Sweden, actually, I did have a picture I sent into this. I don't know if you have them there, but if you don't, it's okay. It's a gay French imam. He performed a marriage for a lesbian couple in Sweden. His name is Ludovic Mohammed Zahed, 37. He travels the world lecturing about homosexuality and Islam. His own husband moved out on him, and his father told him, "Couples split up, that's normal, my son. It was nothing to do with your homosexuality." And the imam said, "That's the first time my father ever said homosexuality," to comfort him.
Steps forward.
Yes.
Step backward in Uganda, where we found out that the president has signed a new law criminalizing the deliberate transmission of HIV.
And the attempted transmission of HIV, whatever the hell that means.
Well, what it means is that you're not criminalized if the person you're having sex with knows you have HIV and consents. But where they're going to draw the line and how they're going to prove this and who's going to testify to what. 7% of the population is HIV positive.
Well, wait a minute. It's only 5 years for attempted and 10 years for successful completion.
Oh, boy.
It's a lot more in some places in the United States.
Well, yes, that's true. But,
and the AIDS groups are all up in arms about this.
Well, because in Uganda, 7% of the population is HIV positive. It affects a much larger population of people. Also in Uganda, the U.S. Agency for International Development has withdrawn funds for the Anti-Gay Interreligious Council, which has led them to lay off their entire staff because 90-some% of their funding is from USAID.
Maybe they can get some funding from Bill de Blasio. He likes religious groups.
$34.5 million. It is an AIDS group, and the patients it was working with are still getting support from other agencies and groups. But this interreligious council was so anti-gay and so vociferous in its support of the anti-gay, kill the gays law that USAID said, we don't care what you're doing, we're withdrawing our support of you.
In Lebanon, 27 men were detained for being gay on a tips. They raided a Turkish bath, a hammam. The Lebanese NGOs are calling for their immediate release, but I haven't heard about their release.
In Taiwan, a lesbian couple has filed suit. So they have 2 kids who were born to one member of the couple through alternative insemination, but the other member of the couple does not have any parental or guardianship rights. So they're suing for those rights. It's another way to approach the attempt to legalize same-sex marriage in Taiwan.
In Cuba, most legislation there passes unanimously. They get along, unlike our Congress. But Mariela Castro is a big advocate of ours. She's the daughter of President Raul Castro, a niece of Fidel. She voted no on a workers' rights bill because it did not protect people with what she calls unconventional gender identities. So she's standing up. And
in Luxembourg, congratulations to the conservative out-gay prime minister who has announced that he is now engaged to his partner, but he won't announce the wedding date yet. We'll follow that closely.
All right, AIDS news.
Yes.
In California, a bill to make it a crime to shoot a sex film without condoms died in committee. this is all being pushed by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation out there.
Yeah, and I think the question has become complicated with the use of Truvada.
Truvada, and the industry would say with scrupulous use of testing.
Yeah, to me, testing in this situation is shutting the barn door after the horses.
Well, no, but they claim they claim they use very the high-powered tests, not like some 6-month test or something. I'm not defending. I'm just saying the science has changed on testing.
Let's just say it's not perfect.
And they say they haven't had an infection as a result of a film since 2004.
Yes. Thank you and congratulations to New York City Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, who announced that she has the HPV virus as a public service to let people know that this is common and out there. I'm a little surprised by the hysteria around this announcement, like, oh, she's announced, she blah, blah, blah. Yes, people should get tested for HPV, and not just women. You can acquire it through anal intercourse. You can acquire it, in
Men
many
should
ways.
Get tested
Absolutely.
anally.
Yeah, absolutely, because it can cause cancer. It also can be shed. It's not 100%, but
she wants to remove the stigma from it. I mean, don't forget, we're living in an age when, most people with HIV and AIDS don't come out anymore. Why would they?
I applaud what she did.
Yes.
I think it was absolutely the rational thing to do, but I am surprised at the amount of stigma connected to her announcement.
Yes. And Mayor de Blasio, who I've knocked a couple of times today on the show, is very proud of her, and we are too.
Okay. We're not, however, proud of the Food and Drug Administration in the case of A.J. Bett in Iowa. A 16-year-old boy committed suicide last year. He'd been bullied in school when he came out, and his family wanted to donate his organs to people who needed them.
Yep.
And this is what happened.
A.J. Betts took his own life at his home in Pleasant Hill.
Months before his death, he decided to become an organ donor, but his mother has now learned that his wish was not fully granted because he was gay. Shana Humphreys has our top story.
The most precious letter she'll ever receive tells Cheryl Moore what became of her son's kidneys, liver, heart, and lungs.
I was very happy to hear that a 14-year-old boy got his heart. He would have really liked that.
But she couldn't help but feel the letter was incomplete. After years of bullying led to AJ committing suicide, her hope was to again one day look into his eyes.
My initial feeling was just very angry because I didn't understand why my 16-year-old son's eyes couldn't be donated just because he's gay.
His eyes were rejected because of an FDA regulation. It came about decades ago at the height of the AIDS epidemic. It makes would-be donors ineligible to donate certain tissue if they're believed to have a risk factor for communicable diseases.
They asked me if my son had been sexually active, and my response was something to the effect of, no. He'd never had a boyfriend. I'd never known of him even going out on a date. But then I was like, well, I don't know. He's 16 years old.
That, the donor network had to assume he'd been sexually active in the last 5 years and thereby ineligible to donate his tissue or eyes.
Now, the exclusion is not limited to certain tissue donations. Gay men are also banned for life from donating blood. It's a regulation many say needs to be updated.
This is archaic, and it is just silly that people wouldn't get the life-saving assistance that they need because of regulations that are 30 years old.
Recently, national medical organizations have publicly stated their opposition to the current FDA law. Moore hopes AJ's story will help more people see why. In Des Moines, Shana Humphreys, KCCI 8 News, Iowa's news leader.
Well, it is insane that they could donate the heart, lungs, kidney, and liver, and not the eyes.
And the ones you named that you can donate, they say as long as the recipient understands the risks. But of course, if the science of it is, test the damn thing.
Test the eyes, test the heart, test the lungs.
And blood is banned. Since if you've had sex, a man has had sex with another man since 1977.
I believe those organs contain blood.
Yes.
All right. Well, this is the insanity of the world.
By the way, I
in.
forgot to mention that Jim Jeffords, the former senator from Vermont, died.
Yes.
He was a big supporter of ours. He was originally a liberal Republican, and he became an independent.
Yes.
All right.
Entertainment news.
Well, I just have my gallery going this week. What else do you have?
I've been touting this film on Showtime, L Word, Mississippi. Update on that. A couple of the women in the film announced that they've gotten an outpouring of support, which is great, but they've also received a little obscene, violent, anonymous call. They called the cops and FBI, and the cops and FBI said, well, the caller blocked his number, so there's nothing we can do.
Oh, yeah? Call the NSA.
Excuse me.
Are you kidding?
No, evidently. And congratulations to basketball stars Brittany Griner of the Phoenix Mercury and Glory Johnson of the Tulsa Shock, who are engaged.
Right. Well, I went to the Leslie Lohman Museum of Lesbian and Gay Art this week. They had an opening of stuff from their permanent collection. They apparently have like 24,000 things. This is the only accredited museum of gay art. There's other kinds of gay museums. Only in the country, it's down there at 26 Worcester Street. You can go to their website, which is leslielohman.org. That's LESLIELOHMAN.org. I thought this was a terrific exhibit, and I'll give you an example of something that was in their collection. Now, that's a picture of just two men a little bit under the covers in bed from David Hockney from 1966. This sketch remained controversial and was kept hidden at some libraries and museum collections because there are several prints of it until the 80s. You had to ask to see it. Now, it really just shows intimacy. There's no genitals being shown or anything like that.
No, but clearly it is intimacy. It's,
yes.
They're naked,
well, I meant
they're
sexual.
in bed.
I meant sex.
Yes.
Yes.
But they're not just friends.
But,
or maybe they are.
This exhibit includes a lot of photographs from Peter Hujar, who was partners with David Wojnarowicz, Red Grooms, Berenice Abbott. It's there till September the 28th. At the Leslie Lohman Gallery. And then they're going to have another exhibit by our friend Jonathan David Katz, who did the Hide-Seek exhibit. It's called The Classical Nude and the Making of Queer History.
So check out the Leslie Lohman Museum of Lesbian and Gay Art and see what they have coming up.
And you've only got until September 1st to see degenerate art. I took a long time to do this. Well, that picture up there is called The Four Elements. This is the Nazi-approved art. Not only that, this is what Hitler kept over his mantelpiece. It's just four nude women, but it's all in classical style, really pedestrian painting from 1937 by Adolf Ziegler. And then we'll show you the other picture. The kind of stuff they banned, it wasn't, it was just, no, this is a painting from 1919 by Lasar Siegel called Eternal Wanderers. No, it's just, they didn't like distortion of faces, Picasso, all those kinds of things.
They didn't like modernism.
They didn't like modernism.
So
and they collected it. This is at the Neue Gallery, N-E-U-E, Galerie, really, G-A-L-E-R-I-E.org. You can check that out. It's up there at 86th and 5th, and it's an amazing exhibit, especially when you see the Nazi-approved stuff side by side with the disapproved stuff.
Yes, well, I think pedestrian is a perfect word for it. Of course, the Nazis looted all sorts of genius art.
Goering kept a lot of the good stuff, because it
was just Hitler, the painter, who had bad taste.
No, I mean, they all had to line up. I mean, you can see films of people in Munich in 1937 going to this thing. Now, they're all on film, so they're all looking at it like, the degenerate art, like, ooh, Then they go home but none of it included us, You hear about degenerates back in the 30s. You think you're going to see gay images. No gay images.
Oh, were you disappointed?
Yes. Well, I mean, how many artists did us in those days?
All right. Well, then I'll take the last few seconds to again recommend this documentary, The L Word, Mississippi, on Showtime, because I'm sure it's available on demand, and it's a good, up-to-date, realistic, diverse view of lesbians in Mississippi, and well worth catching, no matter what the anonymous caller has to say.
Right.
So we will see you next week. It's the dead of summer, but there's still news. And
it just keeps coming. Okay. And you keep sending it to us. And if you want to be on our email list, just write to me, andyhum@AOL.com, and we'll put you on the list. Right, Bill?
Yes. But it's a good list, not a bad list.
Yes.
All
Once
right.
a week, generally.
See you next week. Bye.